Right now, somewhere on this planet, a living creature is in the final moments of its life, not because it was killed instantly, but because it is being eaten alive, not hunted down and dispatched in a single blow, but held, restrained, and slowly consumed by something stronger, faster, or simply more numerous. And while we often imagine death in the wild as something quick or merciful, the biological reality is very different. In many predator attacks, death is not immediate. In fact, the human brain can remain conscious for several seconds and sometimes even minutes after catastrophic injury begins. Which means that in those moments, the victim is still capable of feeling pressure, suffocation, disorientation, shock, and eventually, pain. To understand what being eaten alive would actually feel like, we have to look at how different predators kill, and more importantly, how the human body responds when it becomes prey. Lion, suffocation, before pain. A lion attack rarely begins with a roar or a dramatic chase. In most real-world cases, victims report that the attack happens in near silence. Lions rely on stealth, close in distance before their presence is ever noticed. When the attack begins, the first sensation is not pain, but impact. A fully grown lion can weigh nearly 190 kilograms, and when it launches its body at you from behind, the force can be comparable to being hit by a moving vehicle at low speed. This sudden collision is often enough to knock a person completely off balance and force the air out of their lungs instantly. Before you can inhale again, the lion's jaws are already closing around your throat or skull. At this point, the primary cause of death is not blood loss, but suffocation. The lion's bite compresses the trachea and the carotid arteries, which are responsible for supplying oxygenated blood to the brain. Within seconds, blood flow begins to drop. Your vision narrows. Sound becomes distant and distorted. Your limbs begin to feel heavy or numb. At this stage, the physical injury is only part of what the body is experiencing. Because when a human being undergoes sudden life-threatening trauma, the brain activates an emergency survival response known as the acute stress reaction. Adrenaline and cortisol are released into the bloodstream almost instantly, increasing heart rate and redirecting blood flow toward major muscle groups. This is why many victims report not feeling pain immediately after catastrophic injury. Instead, the first sensations are often confusion, pressure, or a strange sense of detachment from reality. Time perception may also begin to distort. Events that are happening over the course of only a few seconds can feel stretched into much longer moments. As the brain attempts to process overwhelming sensory input, vision may narrow into tunnel vision. Hearing becomes muted. Fine motor control begins to deteriorate. As oxygen delivery to the brain decreases, cognitive function declines. Thoughts become fragmented. Decision-making slows. Eventually, conscious awareness begins to shut down. Loss of consciousness typically follows shortly afterward. Tiger. Blunt force trauma. Unlike lions, tigers tend to rely on explosive frontal attacks, often targeting the upper body. A Bengal tiger, which inhabits regions of India, including the Sundarbans, can exceed 220 kilograms in weight and is capable of accelerating over short distances with astonishing speed. When it strikes, the force of the impact alone can fracture ribs or damage internal organs. Victims often describe the sensation as being tackled by something impossibly heavy and impossibly fast. In the seconds following the hit, Adrenaline floods the bloodstream. This hormonal surge temporarily suppresses pain signals, allowing the brain to focus entirely on survival. But as the tiger pins you to the ground with its forelimbs, its jaws begin searching for a killing hold, typically around the neck or shoulder. Its canine teeth are designed to puncture deeply through muscle tissue and clamp down on bone. As pressure increases, the structural integrity of the rib cage or spinal column begins to fail. At this point, the brain again enters an acute stress response state. Sensory overload begins affecting perception. Your awareness may become fragmented. Time may feel unusually slow. Your movements may feel delayed or disconnected from intention. As oxygen levels fluctuate and blood pressure drops, your ability to coordinate voluntary movement begins to fail. Tunnel vision intensifies. Auditory perception fades. Eventually, cerebral function becomes impaired due to oxygen deprivation and trauma-induced shock. Unconsciousness follows soon after. Crocodile, disorientation, and drowning. Crocodile attacks are among the most sudden and disorienting predator encounters on Earth. Because they occur at the water's edge, victims often have no warning whatsoever. The initial bite from a large crocodile can exert over 3,000 pounds of pressure per square inch, enough to shatter bone instantly. But the bite itself is only the beginning. Once secured, the crocodile drags the victim underwater and begins a behavior known as the death roll, a rapid spinning motion designed to tear flesh and dismember prey. During this rotation, joints can dislocate and ligaments can rupture. Simultaneously, water begins entering the airway. As the victim attempts to inhale, fluid fills the lungs instead of air. Panic sets in almost immediately, causing involuntary gasping that accelerates drowning. As oxygen intake becomes restricted, the brain begins experiencing hypoxia. Early symptoms include confusion, dizziness, and visual disturbance. Motor control deteriorates. Muscles weaken. The prefrontal cortex begins losing function, impairing rational thought. Eventually, loss of consciousness occurs as oxygen deprivation continues. Python, circulatory collapse. Contrary to popular belief, constrictor snakes such as pythons do not kill by crushing bones or suffocating prey in the traditional sense. Instead, they disrupt circulation. After biting to establish a hold, the python wraps its coils around the torso and begins tightening with each exhalation. This pressure prevents veins from returning blood to the heart, causing a rapid drop in blood pressure. As circulation slows, oxygen delivery to the brain decreases. Victims may begin to feel dizzy or disoriented within seconds. Tunnel vision may develop. Auditory perception may become muffled. As cerebral blood flow declines, consciousness becomes increasingly difficult to maintain. Eventually, fainting occurs. Cardiac arrest may follow shortly afterward. Shark. Hemorrhagic shock. In the open ocean, shark attacks often begin with a sudden strike meant to determine whether the target is viable prey. The teeth of predatory sharks are serrated, allowing them to slice cleanly through skin and muscle. If a major blood vessel is severed, rapid blood loss can occur. Initially, the victim may feel little to no pain due to shock, but as blood pressure drops, symptoms of hemorrhagic shock begin to appear. These include dizziness, confusion, blurred vision, and weakness. As circulation becomes insufficient to support brain function, consciousness fades. In many cases, death results from circulatory collapse before drowning occurs. Wolf pack, coordinated trauma. Wolves hunt cooperatively. which significantly increases the lethality of an attack. Rather than delivering a single fatal bite, pack members target multiple areas simultaneously, including the limbs and abdomen. As they pull in opposite directions, tearing forces are applied to soft tissue. Muscle fibers separate, skin ruptures, blood loss increases rapidly. As systemic shock develops, heart rate rises, and blood pressure begins to fall. Oxygen delivery to tissues becomes compromised. Confusion sets in. Motor coordination deteriorates. Eventually, neurological shutdown leads to unconsciousness. Bear. Skeletal damage. Bear attacks are characterized by immense blunt force. A swipe from a large bear's forelimb can generate enough energy to fracture bone or cause traumatic brain injury. Claws can penetrate deeply into muscle, exposing internal structures. As the bear bites down on the skull or torso, compressive forces may collapse the rib cage. Internal bleeding may begin immediately. As oxygen delivery becomes impaired, the brain begins shutting down non-essential functions. Loss of awareness follows shortly afterward. Fire ants. Systemic overload. While individually small, fire ants can pose a lethal threat in large numbers. Their stings deliver venom that triggers an inflammatory response in human tissue. When exposed to hundreds or thousands of stings, victims may develop anaphylactic shock. Airway swelling begins restricting airflow. Blood pressure drops rapidly. Oxygen intake becomes insufficient to sustain organ function. Eventually, loss of consciousness may occur. Conclusion: predators do not act out of cruelty or malice. They do not hunt for revenge. They hunt to survive. And in the wild, survival often means consuming prey before death has fully occurred. Because in nature, there is no clean divide between being alive and becoming food. But it's also fascinating, and the deeper you look into it, the more you realize how thin the line is between predator and prey. If you enjoyed learning about the hidden realities of the wild, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Because every week we explore strange, terrifying, and unbelievable facts about the world that most people never even think about. So subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.